Hello again to everybody. Welcome to another webinar. Today's is right engineer at the right place at the right time with the right tools. Fixing it first time. That's a bit of a mouthful. Joining me today is, as has done many times before, Steve Lindsay.
Morning everybody. And afternoon or evening.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? We're actually recording this in the morning, but of course it can be and often is more often than not consumed at all hours of the day or night. I often do it when I'm lying in bed. Like get up in the morning and I come across something, or I'm about to go to sleep and my wife is nudging me saying, get off your phone, and I'm actually got my headphones in listening to a webinar. So maybe someone else is going to experience that with us three, which is a scary thought.
This has gone to a weird place already.
Yeah, and that's an opportune moment to introduce the third host, Adrian Clark. Hello, Adrian. Yeah. Good morning, Adrian.
Good morning, evening, afternoon, and night.
Sound like I gotta say, it sounds like a Truman Show. Okay, good. Looking forward to this one today. As usual, what we'll do is we'll talk about some of the challenges associated with what is, if we boil it down, it comes down to scheduling, guys, doesn't it? Really,
it does.
Although it's a lengthy title. So what we'll do as normal is we'll talk about some of the challenges associated with scheduling, things that people tell us. So whilst we don't purport to be the expert in scheduling, what we're essentially doing is, or what we do as part of our roles, it's fair to say, particularly you, Steve, is we're gathering information from the many people that you speak to in the industry who are doing this. Is that right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think it's probably worth just to jump onto the next slide. Yeah, so yeah, in my role or job, I spend a lot of time talking to service repair hire businesses, and core to their business and their operations is the service controller and the scheduling team, which yeah, is obviously a very dynamic environment, live operations with lots of things changing. But yeah, I've had lots of conversations with lots of different teams in different sectors that, yeah, many of the issues or the challenges they face are actually quite similar, quite common.
Yeah, I think that's good for webinars such as this, because we know, regardless of the industry that people are in, as you said, we know from speaking to them that the challenges are largely very similar, unless they're specifically or unless they're particularly niche to a specific sector, which does happen. I mean, these are the ones that we most commonly hear. These are the challenges that people face, aren't they? I guess I could say the logical place to start, I think, is, why do people have these challenges? I mean, what are they doing now that means that there is room for improvement? Why are people frustrated?
I think within a scheduling or service team, you've got typically two types of job where they're scheduling or planning. So you've got a regular scheduled work, which may be service, PPMs, inspections, whatever it may be, but jobs that you do on a regular basis. And then you've got ad hoc repair jobs with customers ringing up saying such and such is broken, please fix it as quickly as possible. So you've got quite a dynamic environment, lots of things changing, and from a lot of the teams that we speak to where they have inefficient scheduling or inefficient processes, it's because the access to information for them to make sort of the best decision, informed decisions, they may need to go to a spreadsheet or to their email or to a separate software system, or ring the customer or ring the engineer, all just to collect the information to make the decisions on the most appropriate, maybe most appropriate engineer, most appropriate route, or whatever it may be for that day for doing those scheduling. So it's just that constant reacting to an ever-changing environment and having to search for information to make decisions.
Yeah, when you put it like that. Sorry, Ed.
I was just saying, as we've said before, in other webinars, information is king. Without good quality, real-time, accurate information, it's really hard to make any really sensible decision.
Yeah. What I was going to say was, it based on what Steve just said, it's not it's not difficult to understand why people make mistakes. You know, and that's one of the things that kind of creeps into this. There's lots of other stuff as well, but you know, part of this inefficiency is it's really easy to get it wrong, isn't it?
It is really easy to get it wrong, and that has lots of different impacts. So, you know, first and foremost, it has an impact with your customer. So, you know, you might have an engineer turning up to site, he doesn't have the parts, or he might not have the right permits in place to actually access the site, or he turns up to a piece of equipment and he isn't qualified to work on that particular piece of equipment, or he can't access it. So there's lots of different reasons which impact the customer, but that also impacts the engineer. You know, when mistakes are made, it also impacts the controller, because then that comes back on the controller and it makes the controller's life more difficult and makes them look bad as well. So, you know, it's yeah, you can't blame the controller if you haven't got the tools to do the job, really.
Yeah, and that's why things like the first time fix rate are so important. There's lots of obvious benefits associated with it, which I'm sure we'll touch on. But the other thing is, from a scheduling point of view, if it's not fixed first time, it's another job, isn't it, to be scheduled? So it's just you're adding more pressure onto all of the work that's coming in the meantime as well.
Yeah, you've got a customer that's not had their piece of equipment fixed, so you've got an annoyed customer. You've got an engineer that's got to come back to site, so you know, maybe later that day or later in the week, which will take them out of their planned route. So you, at the moment, we all know about how much it costs to fill up a tank of fuel at the petrol station, unless you're lucky enough to be driving an electric car or electric van. But you know, there's even just the fuel costs have a big impact nowadays. They're sort of almost doubled in cost. So yeah, there's lots of different impacts or consequences of turning up to site and not being able to fix something while you're there first time.
Yeah. And it's clear to say, you know, we're not suggesting that people, you know, hit anything ridiculous like a 99 or 100% first time fix rate. As we always say with this kind of stuff, it's about increasing percentages, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, it's preventing the cock-ups, really. Yeah, so it's the ones where if you go to site and you need to replace an engine, or there's a major piece of work to be done, then you are going to likely to have to come back. But yeah, it's for when it's the preventable ones that it's preventing those where you've turned up and the right paperwork's not in place, or you've turned up to a service and you know that you need those parts, but they're not on, and go to the back of your van and they're not there. It's those sort of instances which are avoidable.
Well, should we try and, do you want to pick a couple of these out for us, Steve, that you think are the most?
I tell you one that I see often in sort of scheduling teams or the service departments is they've often got sort of big whiteboards on the walls with lots of different colours for different customers with different jobs, solely to try and manage service level agreements. So when you've got a particular contractual agreement with a customer to be at site within a certain time period, and being able to manage that time period, that service level agreement, having visibility of it, and more importantly is being alerted when it's getting close to you breaching it. So I think that's a key one that we come across a lot, and that if you don't get that right, that can be annoying customers who've got an unhappy customer, or it can be on some industries you actually get financial penalties for not meeting your SLA, so it's costing people money. So yeah, that being stressful to try and manage those critical jobs and prioritize those is something that's often frustrating for people.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think, most of the other ones that I see on the screen here that you've put up are ones that in some way we've already talked about in the brief 5 or 10 minutes we've already had. So getting to site, not being able to complete the job. I mean, the consequences of that seem obvious. And that goes back to, actually, there's a significant improvement to be made by just addressing those preventable ones that we talked about, isn't there?
Exactly that, yeah. And I think the other one I'd like to just pick up on this slide as well is you know, at the end of the day, the people that really make money for the service and repair businesses is your engineers, it's your field service team, and not being able to efficiently schedule their time and the amount of time that they're spent zooming around the country on motorways and so on, and having them to go inefficient routes and be late getting home and having to set off early and go back to sites. It does impact the sort of the morale of the engineer. And another thing that I could slightly going off topic here at the moment, but we often hear, especially at the moment, getting hold of good engineers is difficult and it's costly. Yeah. So having an efficient schedule is not just impact your customers and your controllers, but it has a big impact on the guys that are out on the road doing the work, and, you know, making their life as easy as possible. It is really beneficial for all concerned.
Good. In the interests of cracking on with this, should we move on to the next slide? Because I think the next one will explain some of the possibly obvious benefits of getting it right. So we touched on efficient travel, and that's not just, as you pointed out at the beginning of this, Steve, you know, fuel in itself is hugely expensive at the moment. And if you've got fleets of engineers out there, companies' fuel bills are going through the roof. So any saving there is very welcome. But aside from the fuel as well, the efficient travel, it is also about, as you've just alluded to, keeping them off the road and on the job as much as possible, isn't it?
Exactly that. Yeah, very good point.
Optimum use of engineer resource is, again, quite similar to that, but it's increasing. What we talk about here is focusing on helping companies increase the percentage of billable time that an engineer does, isn't it? So if you've got, I think we've used this in some of our discussions and literature in the past, but a couple of years ago, there was a survey done, and we'll try and maybe post a source later, but effectively they were saying that of an engineer's time, only around 25% of it is perceived as productive or billable. That's the kind of average, which is incredibly low, really. And you can understand the reasons why, because of all of the things associated with travel and administration and all the rest of it. But, you know, you look at it and go, yeah, surely we can improve on 25%.
Yeah, it's about utilising the engineer as much as possible, and then making, you know, in that utilised time, that the engineer is as productive as possible. So it's utilisation and productivity.
Yeah, again, that comes down to making sure that they've got the right tools, as it says in the title, but they've got the right parts, they know what they're doing, you know, all the other things that go around with that.
Middle one, happy engineers and customers, again, seems like an obvious throwaway statement, but isn't. You know, it is really important, because retention of both, particularly, you know, over recent years, has been absolutely key. There's always a competitor looking to tell your customer how they could do a better job. And quite often you'll have people who, frankly, use the type of tools that we provide. They will use that as a way of selling to new customers, won't they? They'll be saying, look, we know what's going on and we do things better because we have these ways of monitoring performance, which delivers you a better result. So, you know, if you're not doing it, somebody else is, and it's going to tell your customer that they can do it better for that reason, aren't they?
Yeah, it comes around that managing the SLAs and the expectations, and being able to even report on that back to the customer as well. Demonstrate the level of service that you are providing.
Last couple, first time fix rate is an obvious one again. And again, it's about increasing percentages. That's where the increase in the margin is. That's how you make more money without having necessarily to bring on new business, isn't it? It's getting more profitable customers from the existing customer base. And the last one, exceeding customer expectations. Yeah, you know, one of the things that people don't consider, as well as things like loyalty with existing customer, is what we call advocacy as well. if you're doing this fantastic job for your customers, then one of the easiest ways to obtain new customers is by having your existing customer tell somebody else they know how great the service you provide.
Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic.
Probably a good point just to dive into, just show you some of the areas of Service Genie software in particular, which impact on some of these things. So if I just, so what I was going to do today is very quickly, and conscious of time, is to go through the two main processes of raising scheduled repair PPM type jobs, and then we'll look at how you service and schedule and plan more reactive ad hoc type jobs, and we'll tie up around the visibility and control piece, which is sort of one of the key frustrations that we often see within the service departments. So I'm just going to touch on various pieces of the software here today. So if anybody out there wants to get into more detail, then please feel free to contact us. The contact details are, I think, on the presentation and on the link as well. But this was really, at the top of the webinar, we mentioned around key challenges as having the visibility of what's going on with the operations in real time and able to make some informed decisions. So this is actually my home page for the Service Genie software. So it's just to demonstrate really this home page has been put together, tailored by me. So I know Adrian's got a completely different looking homepage on there. So I've got the key performance indicators here that are relevant to me. So these are working on a very visual traffic light basis, red, amber, green, to let me know what's going on with my operations. I've got a live view of some key metrics. So, what the service requirements upcoming, what my first time fix rate is, how much cost I've got tied up in parts. So it's just having this information at hand pushed to me. It's relevant for my particular role. So one controller might have a dashboard looking like this, and then another controller in the same building, the same company, might have their dashboard with completely different, looking at different type things.
Again, that's really important, isn't it? Because it's giving the person the information and data that's important to them and their role, isn't it?
It is, and people within the same team often operate differently. They may have different geographies, different mix of customers, they have different personalities with an engineering team, and they want to work in their way. So it's having the live visibility, but the flexibility to see the information in the way that you want to see it. And just on that note here, these are just some tailored notifications, again, around pushing information to the controller rather than the controller having to go to an email or answer a phone, but it's actually in the system, and anything that changes in the system that you want to know about, then you can set up a notification. So an example being a piece of equipment's been picked up, or an engineer's not completed a check sheet in the field, which is often a bugbear for some controllers. An engineer's requested a part. So rather than having to pick up the phone, the engineer's just put on his tablet that he needs a part that it's not got in his van, and that's notified to the office for that to be raised. And to be honest, parts and stock management is a whole topic in itself, and I know we've got another webinar that does that, but getting the right parts available most of the time, there is some functionality we're not going to see today about stock replenishment and stock profiles, which are worth having a look at one of my colleagues' webinars. Another example, and a customer's raised a repair job from the portal, and so on and so on. So it's having that live information pushed to the controllers is sort of a general point. Now I'm going to get into an example, as I mentioned, around the scheduled work planning, service, PPMs, inspections, work that you do on a scheduled time basis. And this is a program we call Equipment Service Schedule. And the objective here is that you just don't miss a service, that it's very clear about how to manage your upcoming service jobs and make sure you don't miss those. So just as an example, we've got our upcoming services by customer. We can have that by asset if you want to. And it's showing me in a very visual way that we've got an overdue service here because it's marked in red. So I need to do something about that. We can filter this service list by area, by engineer, by customer, by postcode, by timescale, using the filtered buttons at the top. And also, again, a lot of companies work in different ways. So it's giving that flexibility to companies to work in the way that they best feel is efficient. So we've got all our upcoming services here. We can select a whole batch of them, and we can raise them by sending them direct to an engineer's device. So we don't need to actually schedule these services. The engineer, we often see this with engineers in London, the engineer knows the most efficient way to service these customers in the next month around London. So we're just going to batch issue all those services for that time period direct to the engineer's mobile. Or we can raise these jobs and send it direct into the diary at the service date that's planned here, or we can send it into a planning list and then use a service planner to optimize that the calendar using a diary and a job list. So there's lots of different ways on how you can actually plan service work.
Just to clarify, Steve, what we're saying is we've got a load of contracts in the background with the customer, with their assets on there, with a set frequency for when we're going to, how often we need to do a service and what type of service. And this is simply saying, when we access this, we're saying, here is a list of all of those services that are due in date order soonest first.
Yeah, very, very well put, Gary.
So it's also worth pointing out, just because I'm very pedantic about this, that it doesn't have to be a set frequency. So it can be a variable frequency, or it can go from the running hours of the piece of equipment. So if there are a couple of ways of getting the running hours into the system, whether it be via the mobile software for the engineer or the web portal or in this program. But also you can create, if the manufacturer provides telematic data, then potentially that telematic data can be spit into the system, and that can trigger when the next service is due.
So we can service on usage as well as just periodic dates.
Yeah, and that's quite a hot topic at the moment, whether it be telematics or IoT, pulling information from the equipment in the field on usage, and that's driving the service schedule, the frequency. And just to drill down a little bit, this is some of the information which is really important for somebody who's planning service work or scheduled work to know. So you always got the information around the equipment, when the next service is due. Often we find a lot of our customers that have a preferred engineer for their customer. So there's the same engineer is associated with that contract or with that customer or with that site. So they can be linked to this as well. So you don't have to make a decision about who's the best person is. You can automatically allocate the work to that person, to that engineer. Got details that you can drill into around the specific contract, what service type it is. Very importantly, what the estimated or forecasted hours are for doing that particular service as well. So that is generated or can be generated based on the type of equipment that you're working at. But often, if you're working on an X piece of equipment on one site, it might take you 2 hours, but working on the same piece of equipment on another site, maybe 3, because you've got access issues. So you can actually update this specifically for this customer. This is how long it takes us to service this particular piece of equipment. So then we've got a really accurate understanding of how much time it takes to service, and then we can optimize the diary to make sure that we're getting the most services done in a day, in a week, in a month.
So that's important for a number of reasons. I think that little bit of data, because when you're planning ahead, obviously it's good to know how much resource you require in what time period in order to fulfill those services, which I think is really important. If you're having to juggle work around, and you're looking for gaps to put in things like to go and do a repair, again, it's really handy to know how long a particular job that somebody's going to, how long it's forecast to be. And now, as we all know, in the materials handling industry, certainly, you know, a job might, on the face of it, look like it's going to take 30 minutes and then could take 3 hours. So there is a level of unpredictability. But I think with the services, they tend to be relatively, you know, relatively uniform. So another benefit of having that data in there, which you can, again, as Steve pointed out, you can put against either an individual piece of equipment or you can put against a particular model, is that you can then start to benchmark the services that you're delivering for that type of equipment and benchmark the engineers delivering it. So you can, as a side effect of that, you can find out who is doing that job quicker, who's taking more time to do it. And that may really then point to who needs additional training. You know, is there a way of doing that service which is quicker and more efficient? And therefore, should you be rolling that out to everybody else? So those times can then be updated to be more accurate. So there's a lot of benefits really from having that little bit of data there.
Yeah, there's a bit of a danger of going into too much detail here, but there's different industries, for example, that maybe in the HVAC, you may be going to site and servicing a high volume of pieces of items of equipment. If it's HVAC, fire and security, you've got a high volume of items that you're servicing. So this estimated hours is very important. To know how much time you've got on site, but also it relates back to here around forecasting how much service resource you need to service those customers and those items. So having that information not just impacts from a service point of view, but making sure you've got the right amount of resource and capacity to fill your service contracts as well. And so just one little last point on this screen as well before we jump into that ad hoc stuff. And as the title said at the beginning, it's all about getting the right person at the right place at the right time, but also with the right parts and tools as well. So behind this, and it's not displayed on this particular table, but we've got the recommended service parts for that particular type of service is linked here as well. So I know for a minor service that I might need a filter, grease, a screw, whatever it may be, and you can associate that to this service. So rather than going to have a look at a spreadsheet to make sure that I've got the parts required for the upcoming services, I can select all the services that I've got for the next month and then manage the service items. So this is just making sure that we're turning up to a service with the right parts on our vans. So this knows that we need these items, and I can either reserve them from stock or raise a purchase order, and it kicks off another process there. But that is very important around getting to site and knowing that you have the parts on the.
Well, that is a classic preventable requirement for a second visit, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. Okay, so yeah, if you guys have got anything more to add on sort of the regular scheduled work.
Nope.
Okay, no. Well, what I'll do now is, again, I'm going to take you through a quick process on when you've had a incoming query or call from a customer, whether it be a phone call or an email or via the customer portal. Something's broken down in the field. I need somebody to come and fix it as quickly as possible. So this is a program which again is designed to provide the controller with as much information as possible for them to be able to make decision on who's the best located engineer, who's got the right skill sets, who's got the parts on the van, who knows that customer. All this sort of information needs to be at the fingertips of the controller. So if I now search for, you've got multiple search options at the top, but if I search for Rolls-Royce as an example, this is now giving me a view of all the pieces of equipment that are on that particular customer site. We've got some colour codes on here to tell us whether we've got ongoing jobs on there or overdue services. So we've got some visual indicators without having to click anything about what's going on with these particular pieces of assets on this particular customer's site. It's giving me information on the sites, what I need to be aware of about before I go to site. So it's giving me a prompt that we need to get some PPE in place, or high visibility jackets must be worn when we visit this site. And it's telling us for these particular pieces of equipment that we need to check the points on every visit. So it's around pushing information to the controller so they can make informed decisions. And it's also telling us where we've got a contract in place when the next service is due. But also within, again, trying to get information live as easy as possible. We've got information around the service schedule. There's things around quotes and specification, but I want to drill in today. This is around getting information around what's happened on that particular piece of equipment. So if I just drill down as an example, this is telling me all the jobs that have been done on that particular piece of equipment over time. So it may be, we look at the last job or the job history and we can see, oh, we replaced the motor on that particular job, or we fixed this item, and maybe that be relevant, and we'll make the engineer aware of that. So it's giving us information, and we can drill down into the detail behind these jobs at this point as well. Or we can simply look at what parts have we installed on this particular piece of equipment. We've got high volume of filters that we've added here. Maybe it's a filter that we need to replace, so we'll send an engineer out that's got that filter available on the stock. So, a touch of a button, the controller's got a lot of information which helps them hopefully do some of that triage work for the engineer before the engineer starts to site and has to start cold.
You very quickly you're building a picture very quickly as to what might be going on, aren't you? Which, as you alluded to, helps you make a better decision at this point.
It does. And so we've got all this information around this customer about this particular piece of equipment. I'm actually now going to raise a job. So I'll just show you how to raise a job here. I keep on sort of repeating myself here, but it's really important. You want the controller focused on making decisions which computers can't make, but the computer supporting you that by pushing information to you. So the system's telling me, again, rather than me having to go to look for it, be aware we need high vis, be aware that we need to check points on this here. So it's pushing this with a pop-up rather than the controller having to go to look for it. Another important point on this, so I'm not going to go through a lot of the obvious stuff on this screen and just pick out the points that we mentioned at the beginning of the webinar as frustrations. Often managing the service levels, the service level agreements when we're supposed to be at site for this particular customer. And as you can see, it's automatically being populated. So we know for this customer and this particular piece of equipment that we need to be on site today by 10 o'clock tonight, or else we're going to miss our service level. The controllers don't have to think about that. That's automatically populated. If we need to change that, we've got an agreement with the customer, then we can change that to a different service level at this point here. So this is what drives that target date and time. And these are user configurable, so you can specify as many different service levels as you need. But these are just some examples that we've got there. So yeah, does that make sense, guys?
Yeah, so that's a 12-hour response. So it's put the target date and time 12 hours ahead. I've got a question that some people might be thinking. What if can you configure when the SLA applies? So what happens if it's over a weekend, or it's out of hours, or it's a bank holiday? Will it accommodate for stuff like that?
Yes, it will do. So the way that you set the SLA agreement and the way that it's alerted, measured and alerted to the customer, to the controller, which you'll see on the next screen, is fully configurable. So you can specify if it's the next working day, or if it's a weekend, then you can have different service levels that kick in at certain times.
Excellent.
I'm trying to relate back to some of the frustrations that we mentioned at the beginning of the session as well. So another point on efficiency and not having to go to sites numerous times. We can also, this is a repair job, but the controller's got also the visibility of actually, while we're on site, there's a service due. So why don't we add the service to the job as well? So we've got very quickly visibility. It's telling me again an equipment prompt, but we're now being more efficient and with our scheduling and planning because we're mopping up two jobs with one visit. So that's an important point I wanted to highlight. And also,
it's good that you did that, because that is something that I do talk to people a lot about, is going to site to do a job where there's already a job and they don't realize, and engineers going today to do a reactive job and then going back Wednesday next week to do a service job. I mean, that's a conversation we have a lot, isn't it?
It is, and it's difficult for a controller without remembering in their mind or looking through a person's diary or a list of the spreadsheet of the jobs to be able to pick that information up. You know, that's something that really can only be alerted to you by using a system to prompt you. The other bit that I wanted to point out just before we dive into raising a job and the key thing around the planner is that you've also got paperwork that's linked to this job automatically. So I don't need to think about whether I need a risk assessment or method statement, or if I need to add a permit or the right check sheet. That's all automatically added to the job. So again, the controller doesn't need to think about that information. It's all done for them. So what I'm going to do now is raise this particular job and just talk through a couple of options. Actually, before we do that, just on your point, Gary, around raising a job at the same site, this is now telling me that we've already got jobs as a demonstration system. We've already got jobs for this particular customer for this particular site. So it's asking me whether I want to wrap those jobs up with an existing job where an engineer is already going to site and add it to that, again improving the efficiency. So it's just another pop-up on that point, but I'm going to add it as a new job just so I can take you through the confirmation screen here. So we mentioned, we've touched upon having the right parts with services, getting the right engineers, obviously a key thing as well. So often, if you're servicing a variety of different equipment, you'll have the different skill sets within your engineering team that are appropriate for fixing different things. So this screen here just allows us to make sure that we've got the right engineer with the right skill set, but also working in the right area, and also is available for the work as well. So we can start making decisions. So if you've got a piece of equipment where you need to have a specific qualification to work on it, then the system will only let you raise a job for that particular engineer for that particular piece of equipment, or it'll at least alert you to do that. So just as an example, I'm going to add Adam to the list here, and add him to the job, and confirm that job. And it's telling me actually Adam's on holiday for these two tasks. So there's no point raising the job for Adam because he's not available. Or I think this is a bit harsh, but it's one of our customers that requested this. I could actually cancel the engineer's holiday and assign the job to him anyway. Maybe it's a critical job. So
give him a call and get him to come back from Benidorm.
Exactly that, yeah. That's really mopping up how you identify the right resource based on area and skill set for a particular job, and you can issue it direct to the engineer at that point. But I'm now going to take you through to really, this is the right word, the cockpit, or the screens, the programs that our customers would most use to do the control of visibility of their operations, their repair, and all the jobs within the business. So this is what we call our scheduling screen, our planning screen. and it's actually 3 screens in one here. So we've got a list of all the jobs that I am responsible for this particular service controller. So you've got a lot of information on this particular table, and you can actually add more information. This is a whole raft of information sat behind here. So I can actually see less information or more information, again, around having flexibility dependent on what the controller wants to see in the information. So this is a list of all the jobs that are relevant to me. I can filter this list. I can do lots of things around merging jobs, splitting jobs.
And I guess, Steve, sorry to interrupt, but I was going to say, with the way that it's structured here, would you normally split these screens out onto multiple screens?
Our customers would typically have maybe 2 screens with the job list, a diary, and the map broken out. So just for the purposes of the demonstration and the webinar today, we've got all of them sat on one screen, so it does look busy, but it's actually 3 distinct screens that we've got in one place here. So typically you'd have a diary and a map broken out onto a separate screen.
Got you.
What I was going to just quickly bring up is Steve mentioned the data and showed a drop down with lots of other data points, and then also briefly mentioned the filter. But it's quite an important point that when you're dealing with a lot of data is being able to filter it quickly and easily. And again, it comes down to giving you the right information at the right time to make the right choice. So it is quite important, I think, to just note that when you're filtering that data, given the many data points there are, you can actually save common filters. So if you want to look at all reactive work for these customers or these engineers in the south of England, then, and that's something you do quite regularly, then you can save that filter and then recall it pretty much instantly. So there's not a lot of time, because I mean, there is obviously, depending on the size of the business, they may have quite a lot of jobs on, so it's quite a lot of data to look at. So being able to sort of reduce that down into manageable, sensible chunks that you can focus on is really quite important, I think.
Yeah, it's a very good point, that, Adrian. And I think from a service controller's perspective, they want to understand what jobs that they're responsible for and which ones be able to prioritize these jobs. So where we've mentioned in the previous screen, the service level agreement, that target date and time, we've got a very clear visual representation of where we are against that service level here. So there's a couple here with red, which means that we've gone over the service level, and the ones that are green, we're operating in good time. So it's a very visual prompt for the service controller to prioritize those jobs. There's jobs that we need to get a grip of, or else we're going to get unhappy customers. So there's information around prioritizing the jobs here. We've also spoken multiple times around having visibility of parts. So we're not sending the engineer to the job without the right parts. And here we've got a little icon which gives us a view of the status of parts on jobs. So this one's giving us a big red box saying that we've got a purchase order with an open purchase order with a part that we're waiting for that particular job. This one, we've got an open purchase order, and we've got 1 item booked on the job. And then the ones in green are the ones where we've had all of the items booked. So again, for the controller, you can look up and down the screen very quickly and see where there are jobs where we need to do something on the parts elements.
It's like you said as well, it's about being armed with the information to do something the system can't do. So what I would imagine is this is a really good indicator to say, well, if you've got a job that is approaching the SLA or even gone beyond the SLA, and then you look across to the right-hand side and you see actually there's parts that you're still waiting for, then that's the point that you leave the system and make some kind of manual intervention. That's where you ring up the supplier, or you ring up the engineer, or you ring up the parts department and say, it's important that we've got a 12-hour SLA, or we've got a 5-day SLA, or whatever it is. This is the reason I need this part. So it gives you that ability to instill some urgency and focus on the things that are important, isn't it? That's the key bit, is where do you focus your time
Exactly. So much is going on. It's almost you can't see the wood for the trees. So this gives you that focus, that able to prioritize what you do next. So there's a lot of detail behind here, but just for the purposes of today and to try and tie it back to some of the key issues around getting the right engineer, right part at the right time and so on, just to show that we can also, that this diary, as you'd expect, you can display where all your jobs are. So you can start making decisions around who's the best located. We can also display where the engineers are in time as well, so that we can say we've got jobs in this area. Obviously that engineer there, Adrian, is best positioned to service that work. So we can start making decisions by having an accurate live view of the jobs that we've got to deal with and the engineers' locations out in the field. And we've also got that live location and status update is made available on the diary here. So we've obviously got a diary which you can see in a day, week or month view with the upcoming jobs, what status the jobs are in. So we're getting live feedback as when work's being completed, that's updating us as one's been here, so that we can put another job in or whatever it may be. We've also got a live update of what the engineer's currently doing, whether they're working on a job, traveling to a job, on a break, logged off, so on. And obviously Adam's on holiday here, so you've got a live visibility of your resource and who's best positioned to do that. And also, once you've done planning, maybe you planned a guy's day, you can actually look at the route map for the day for the engineer to make sure that they've got a reasonable journey. That looks like a hard day's work, but I've probably done the same sort of miles in my time. So
you've not fixed anything in the meantime, though, have you?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm probably asking a little bit too much for the engineer that day. But again, that looks like a too much of a mammoth day. I need to reassign that job, so maybe actually we'll take it off that job, that engineer, and this engineer's better located, so I'll swap that to his diary. So you can be very flexible on how you're if things change, then you can make quick decisions and move that between your engineers quickly. And you also got the ability to message them directly here. So if they are working on or traveling or working on a job, you might not want to disturb them with a phone call, but send them a quick message which they receive on the tablet, and they can pick that up when they've stopped driving or when they stop working on the job as well.
In a very simplistic way, Steve, what you've just done there, dragging that job from one engineer to the other, is a good illustration of how a scheduler's role actually pans out in reality. It's the balance, isn't it? That's the key. It's the balance between scheduling the preventative maintenance work and also accommodating the reactive work. It's a constant battle. It's a balancing act all of the time, isn't it?
It is, especially for engineers that do both, is having a view of what they've got planned in for the day, but we've got a call out, it's critical. Who's the closest, who's got the right skill sets, who's got the parts on their van to be able to most likely fix that job without us having to go back again. So this is all around giving you all that information in real time to make those decisions.
Right, just conscious of time, Steve, what have we got left?
Well, I think that's that was all I was actually planning on covering today. So yeah, unless you guys have got any questions, I think I'll just flip back to make sure. We've covered everything. So yeah,
I think they're important, but they're kind of summarizing, aren't they? Some of the things that we've discussed, and I think we touched on all of those things, and it won't be difficult for people to see why the things we talked about allow us to potentially make those improvements, increase those percentages, and have these positive impacts. So I think you did a great job of that, Steve. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and if people want more information, because we sort of skirted over a lot of the topics, and we just pulled out the relevant points. But if there's specific things that people want to understand, have a quick chat or any advice over them, then please contact me on the numbers there, on the email there, and yeah, we'd be really welcome to have those sort of conversations.
Great. Okay, thank you for that, Steve. Thank you for that, Adrian. I think we'll leave it there for today. We've ran massively over as normal, so we should probably just start. Do you think if we scheduled them for 45 minutes, we'd actually stick to it, or would we just go to an hour and a quarter?
Probably an hour.
Yeah, I think that was my fault, gents. Apologies. Everyone have a good day, night, afternoon.
Yeah, thank you for that. And of course, in the not too distant future, we'll be doing other webinars. There's plenty available now, historically, which you can access through the website. So hopefully we'll see you again soon. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks, guys. Take care. See you soon.
Yes, bye-bye.